Hello, my name is Christopher Duggan, or you can simply call me Chris, and this is my case study analysis presentation video for PUP 3040 State and Local Government and Public Policy. The video relates to the City of Clearwater Council meeting that I attended on October 14th, and the first reading agenda item 10.2, which would be relating to mooring, beaching, and placement of vessels, otherwise known as Ordinance 9413-20. Now, why I chose this meeting, this particular agenda item, and of course the City of Clearwater? Well, first and foremost, I am a citizen of the City of Clearwater, have been for a little over 20 years at this point. Moved down when my parents came down here when I was a young child. So naturally, being the City of Clearwater, I found it interesting to attend one of their council meetings and saw this first reading item on the agenda and thought it would be quite intriguing to look into, especially considering I work on Clearwater Beach. So I wanted to see what was going to be discussed and perhaps what the amendment was looking to do. Now, first and foremost, the City of Clearwater is home to more than 116,000 citizens as of 2018. It is the second most populated county and the most densely populated county in Florida, being Pinellas County. Clearwater only second to St. Petersburg when it comes to population overall. Now, the City of Clearwater is home to a plethora of attractions, but some of the bigger ones. The first foremost being the Clearwater Marine Aquarium that is located off the Island Way area. It's home to Winter and Hope, notorious for being stars of the movies Dolphin Tale and Dolphin Tale 2. Clearwater serves as the spring training home for the Philadelphia Phillies, world champions in 2008. And also is the home of one of the top-rated beaches for several years in a row, Clearwater Beach. Now, Clearwater Beach is a 3-mile area that stretches from the northern part of Clearwater all the way down to southern parts that border with Bel Air and Bel Air Beach itself. Now, City of Clearwater places a lot of emphasis and pride on its beach and waterway locations, specifically because Clearwater Beach has been ranked as the #1 beach in North America for several years and as high as the #7 beach overall in the world. So just keeping that in mind, City of Clearwater has a lot of pride when it comes to this area, especially its waterways. Now, like I mentioned before, the City of Clearwater is my home, has been for a little over 20 years at this point. Its beach is actually also the location of my current employment, which would be Captain Memo's Pirate Cruise, the red pirate ship that's located down there in the beach marina. So yeah, I've been there for a little over 5 years at this point, and have gotten to be quite familiar with that area, especially when it comes to any sort of vessel ordinance there, and definitely, of course, when it comes to any sort of parking scenarios, just to keep that little subtle point alive. Now, naturally, again, the beach serves as a huge asset. It's responsible for quite a bit, especially when it comes to tourism for not just Clearwater, but Pinellas County and the state of Florida as a whole. Given the current COVID-19 pandemic, early estimates are looking at that the City of Clearwater and the beach itself may lose almost $10 million in revenue this year alone in 2020 because of that. Just keeping that, again, in mind lets you know how important this area is to the City of Clearwater. Revenues from the beach is, again, significantly important to the state, and because of that, the waterways are very important in how we regulate them in the city, and perhaps how any sort of fees, fines, or penalties are leveraged. This brings us to the agenda item that was presented on October 14th relating to mooring, beaching, and placement of vessels. The issue coming forth with this specific agenda item and the amendment it carried specifically involves the placement of vessels on public docks, property of the City of Clearwater, and when it comes to those vessels exceeding time limits, perhaps being docked there for hours and even days at a time, and of course the amount of space that they use up by being there in that period of time. The ordinance that was proposed in that amendment for agenda item 10.2 aims to amend the current ordinance for the City of Clearwater, specifically section 33.055, to include and change the current ordinances when it comes to docking and mooring of vessels. They're looking, as the City of Clearwater, to levy a 3-hour time limit for the use of those public docks in the city of Clearwater during daytime hours. There are already current restrictions when it comes to nighttime overnight use, but specifically for certain docks, the public docks, they're looking to offer out a time limit, a 3-hour time limit, and if anybody uses those public docks and exceeds those 3-hour time limits, they're looking to potentially levy fines against those individuals for excess use. Like I mentioned before, the current ordinance does not specifically address time limits. That's what this amendment is looking to do, to address the issue of overuse and exceeding those time limits. Now, when it comes to instituting fines for excess public parking in these boat slips in these areas, it looks to apply to the 4 locations. Those 4 locations are the Clearwater Beach Marina, which is down as soon as you get onto Clearwater Beach, right before you get to the Pier 60 area. That's where that location would be. The next is the Harbor Marina, which is downtown near the Clearwater Library and just right down the road from City Hall, currently in the Pinellas County Courthouse building. And then the next one would be the Island Estates location, right next to the Clearwater Marine Aquarium and the Island Way Grill. And the final one would be the Clearwater Recreational Center, which for just mapping purposes is right down the road from the Sand Pearl Island Resort, and Frenchie's Rockaway Grill, which is on North Beach. So in those locations. Currently, those are the public locations for docking. Seeing as the city is a hotspot for tourism and everything that is currently beach related, the agenda item is moving toward the top of consideration, and again, ultimately was why I chose that item, because of how important tourism and restaurants and businesses on Clearwater Beach are. It's interesting to see that they're looking to amend this information right here. So, moving forward, it's important to identify the stakeholders when it comes to this agenda item. So this list that I compiled is not, of course, the end-all be-all. It's what I highlighted as the most important and vital when it comes to this specific agenda item and the issue at hand when it comes to time limits, fines, fees, and excess use of public docks. So first and foremost, I highlighted the City Council as they preside over agenda items and ultimately decide whether or not they're going to approve that agenda item. The council also gets to decide whether or not those fines are going to be part of that amendment and that ordinance. Next will be the city manager. So city manager for the city of Clearwater, Bill Horn, identified the issue itself, compiled a report, and put forth the agenda items. So the city manager, Bill Horn, as his job, he aims to, of course, support the council's mission and overall to serve as the chief executive and administrative officer of the city of Clearwater. So his stake in this issue is to offer a solution to the issue at hand, again, to the excess parking. Next would be the Pinellas County government. The Pinellas County government is particularly important when it comes to this issue, specifically when it comes to fines and fees. So the issue at hand, of course, to address the time limits and the excess parking is in the interest of Pinellas County, because when it comes to fines and fees, interestingly enough, the Pinellas County government actually has control over what those fines are going to be and potential fee schedules. So when it comes to this, the city of Clearwater is going to have to perhaps coordinate with the Pinellas County government ultimately to decide whether or not fees and fines are going to be instituted. Also, again, their current ordinance for the county, 11-12, offers their power when it comes to fines and fees in the county's waterways. City Attorney Pam Aiken is another stakeholder I identified when it came to the issue and the proposed agenda item. She ultimately will have to work with the county code as it stands, especially regarding potential fines and punishments. Ultimately, City Attorney Pam Aiken may have to come back to the council with a different proposal or an opinion when it comes to the agenda item. Next on the list that I highlighted as potential stakeholders, restaurants and businesses. Ultimately, several of those public dock locations in the city are well within areas of heavily visited public businesses, private businesses, restaurants, bars, things of that nature. The Clearwater Beach location has become quite the area when it comes to businesses such as restaurants and bars and nightclubs as well. These public dock locations near specifically the beach marina, the rec center, and Island Way. How are they going to be affected by any sort of ordinance update? May they be affected by any sort of fines or fees that may be levied against people who dock their vessels there? That's something that may affect them, especially if limits and fines are instituted. How is that going to affect their business ultimately? Another stakeholder identified, boat owners, as those directly impacted by potential fines and penalties. They have to consider not just whether or not they're going to be utilizing those docks, or if they even want to use Clearwater's waterways in the first place. That is why I identify, of course, those boat owners as a stakeholder. Next, of course, would be general public. Now, while many, such as myself, may not own a boat or a vessel specifically, that does not mean I'm not affected by those fines. Say I decide I want to go out and rent a vessel and perhaps have a group of friends on board, social distanced, of course. How may I be affected if I decide to use those public docks for the city of Clearwater, especially on the beach? I may not be aware of the ordinance. I may not be aware of those time limits. If I come back and I notice my boat may have a ticket or even been towed, that's where this ordinance comes into play. What's the punishment? How am I affected? Again, because I own a boat, I don't own a boat, doesn't mean I wouldn't be affected overall. So when it comes to perspectives overall for this case, I highlighted several perspectives, of course, of those key stakeholders. Ultimately, for the presentation itself, I was there live for that, and of course everything was done online over Zoom when it came to the council and the person presenting, which would happen to be Michael McDonald. I was able to get at least a little bit of an opinion on that. Now, ultimately, I wanted to reach out to Michael McDonald because he did present, but I did get into contact with the city clerk's office in Rosemary Call, and she steered me into the direction of Ed Chesney, currently the director of Marine and Aviation and the environmental manager for the city of Clearwater. Now, I decided to choose Ed Chesney for my expert interview when it came to this case. I do ultimately want to speak to Michael McDonald at some point, hopefully soon here before maybe our paper is done, because again, he did present on behalf of the amendment. Now, speaking with Ed, though, I was able to garner at least a little bit of a window into the issue itself and what the amendment is looking to do. From Director Chesney's perspective, the amendment is ultimately aimed to address, again, the use of those public docks during daytime hours, given the amount of traffic that Clearwater's waterways currently receives. And because of such traffic, ultimately, it would be ideal to institute some sort of limit for use on those public docks. There's a limited amount. Any sort of limit would be ultimately ideal in that case. However, does note that any sort of approval of an amendment or change to this ordinance is merely a stepping stone. The city will have to think of a direction it's going to go if there are limits, that 3-hour limit proposed, and if there are violations to that as well. Again, those are the perspectives that I was kind of able to get on behalf of Director Chesney. Also, that there's going to have to be a lot of intergovernmental cooperation. Again, as I mentioned with City Attorney Pam Aiken and the Pinellas County government. Pinellas County government currently holds power to levy those fines. City attorney's going to have to work perhaps with the Pinellas County government and see if there's any sort of way that those fines would be instituted with a proposed amendment of this nature. Now, again, when it came to this agenda item, the City Council, their perspective, they actually motioned to continue the agenda item. They didn't decide on it there. They did not disclose a date when they would do so. However, I intend to keep a close eye on that and see perhaps when that's coming up. Specifically, Councilman Hamilton had an issue with the fines, thought it was a little too much given what current parking fines are for just vehicles. Thought it was a little inappropriate to levy such a fine, which was actually currently sitting at $116 to boat owners for just a 3-hour time limit session. Pam Aiken, the city attorney for the city of Clearwater, also indicated she would definitely need to speak with the Pinellas County government just to see what those penalties and fees would be, and if there's any way they could potentially change those for the city of Clearwater. Michael McDonald also was addressed with several questions with regard to the issue and the proposed amendment. However, did not have several answers when it came to some of those questions presented by the City Council. Nevertheless, Michael McDonald did indicate he would get back to them at the future date when they decided to discuss this on the agenda once more. Now, overall, when it comes to a proposal or a recommendation for the issue at hand, coming from my end, I understand the need for fines to be issued, perhaps to issue that time limit as well. As somebody who works on the beach down there in the city of Clearwater, I noticed there are vessels that are parked at the Clearwater Beach Marina quite often that use those public areas, and I can tell you from my perspective that they are using them quite often for time more than 3 hours per se. So if there is going to be a limit instituted, I could understand it because of how busy the area is, even in times such as October in the middle of a pandemic. People are going to want to utilize those public docks. So I understand the need for a time limit. My recommendation is to move forward with the time limit proposal, move forward with the amendment. However, there needs to be other pieces involved as well. Specifically, there needs to be signage indicating that there are time limits in those areas, what any sort of penalties may be, the time of day that they can use that location, things of that sort. Another policy recommendation, considering that the city of Clearwater already uses services such as Park Mobile for their vehicle parking at the Clearwater Beach Marina, Pier 60 lots, etc., I would suggest using something like that as well. If somebody patrons those docks and decides to pull up, they may be able to punch their card information in, get a ticket that allows them to park there for a 3-hour maximum. That is something I would suggest. Now, this wasn't something that was brought up at the council meeting there on October 14th, but given the opportunity that they did motion to continue, and seeing as I have an interest now in this amendment and this issue brought forth, I would aim to propose that. I would very much like to attend the meeting, and if I'm seeing this is not being brought forward, this is going to be my policy recommendation. Just because I am the general public doesn't mean I cannot contribute. Especially as a student of the St. Petersburg College Public Policy and Administration program, I would like to utilize the opportunity to do so. So, given all that, that is the issue, that is the policy recommendation as well, and I open the floor to any other considerations, any other recommendations when it comes to this. Again, this is something that, again, doesn't affect just boat owners. It affects a lot of people. Thank you.